Hello and welcome to the MotoGP-Xtra Podcast. Joining me today, as always, for round 17 is Reese, also known as Biker Gaming. Now, we are bang smack in the middle of the flyaways. We're getting out to the final few races of the 2022 season. Thailand is on today's agenda. Crazy races in all categories, crazy weather, crazy stories pre-weekend. That's where we're going to start with today, Reese. As always, we have last few rounds. We've actually had a few bits and pieces we've had to discuss before we got into the action. And this week we have to have the announcement of the two new races next year. Why don't you take it away, Reese, and let us know where we're going to in 2023?
So, two new GPs added to the calendar, one being in Kazakhstan and one being in India. Now, I can't remember the name of the Kazakhstan circuit, but I know that the Indian one is the old Formula One Grand Prix just outside of New Delhi. So, that's a track that you can actually play in GP bikes if you really want, if you want to see what it's like, or in the old F1 games. So, I think it's interesting to see. I've not tried it myself, so I don't know how well it's going to work, particularly with MotoGP, but it will be interesting to see. India, obviously a huge bike market, so it makes sense 100% there. Their rules have changed a lot as well in the last sort of 10 years. Motorsport's now considered a sport rather than entertainment, so that makes things to do with taxes a bit easier. That was one of the reasons I think why Formula One stopped going there. So hopefully, that won't now be a problem for MotoGP. They should be fine now. They're considered entertainment, and I think the Indians are going to absolutely love it because I'm sure there's lots of Indian MotoGP fans. It's bike culture's a way of life there. It's very much similar to sort of China and Indonesia in a lot of the sort of Southeast Asian countries in that aspect where everybody has a motorbike, everyone has a moped. That's how you get people don't have. I mean, people do have cars, but it's more like everyone has a moped. That's how they get around. So in terms of the bike culture, be fantastic, and I'm sure we're going to see some passionate fans like we have a lot of these other sort of Southeast Asian Grand Prix. So I'm sure it's going to be really great to see. A bit of a shock, really, that it's sort of they kind of both came out of nowhere, both sort of Grand Prix. It kind of was like, oh, apparently they're going to India now, and like a week later it got announced. And Kazakhstan, I don't even think I saw any kind of announcement about that, and that is a bit more of a weird one, to be completely honest, because I mean, I'll admit I don't know a lot about the country itself, but it's not, it's not synonymous. It doesn't jump to my mind like some of the other races like India. Like I would have thought you perhaps should go for a Chinese Grand Prix first or something like that. I mean, obviously they had that in the past at Shanghai. Obviously they don't anymore. Obviously, first thing probably pops to mind for me for that is Mako Yachenko, because he raced under the Kazakhstan flag. But I did read online apparently he was actually Russian anyway and just raced under the Kazakhstan flag. So yeah, not too sure about that one, but definitely looking forward to both those two races. Two new tracks. Hopefully, we actually end up going to them, unlike the last track that we were supposed to go to, Finland. The Kimi Rain just dropped off the calendar. Also worth noting, no Aragon next year. That's been knocked off the calendar for. I think it's going to be on a rotation by the sounds of it, but that's also something worth noting.
Yeah, so we do have the provisional 23 calendar, and it looks hectic. Like you said, we've gained two and lost one. Aragon is on a rotation base. How they'll do that, I don't know. I'm not too upset with Aragon. It's an okay track. It's not great for racing.
There's already so many Spanish Grand Prix.
Yeah,
It's not going to hurt to lose one.
exactly. And I think I'm right in saying that it's quite out of the way. Aragon. It's not like it's not a, shall we say, a family-friendly weekend. It's much more kind of secluded, and it's a much harder race to get to. So maybe that was in part of the reasoning, but they probably wouldn't really say that even if it was. Now on to something a bit more controversial. There was a video released on Saturday of a mechanic attacking a rider in a CIP leather CIP team, and when it first got released, nobody knew when it was, nobody knew where it was, nobody knew who the rider was, and as always, it picked up a bit of steam on social media. It went around, and slowly but surely, it started to be revealed who was who and what was what. And it turns out it was Tom Budemos from the 2019 Thai Grand Prix, the last time we'd been to Thailand. And he had just retired from the race from a mechanical issue. A mechanic failed to do on the bike ended in his race being cut short by a few laps, unfortunately. And as he came back to the pits, he has a altercation with the mechanic, and the mechanic starts shouting at him. So he walks in, he gives him a kick in the kind of backside, and then they have a proper scuffle. Now it's very hard to see with the contrast of the camera because the sunlight kind of darkens the pit, so you can't really see more than a couple of kicks, and then it kind of just goes kind of very grey. Now, as the weekend's gone on, lots of things have happened. People have come out. Tom Booth, Amos himself, has come out talking about it, saying that the whole reason he didn't say anything was because he wanted to keep his seat for next year. And he said that's one of many things that happened in that year. Now, other riders are coming out and saying things like it's very common in the paddock for this sort of stuff. There's a rumor, or not even rumors, it's pretty much confirmed that after the whole Aragon issue with Adrian Fernandez and the Max Racing mechanics, that his older brother Raul Fernandez and one of his team members went to find them to kind of put a bruise or two on her, or whatever you want to say, and apparently then one of them rolled over him in the pit lane a couple of weeks later. So apparently there's a lot goes on in the paddock that doesn't get reported, and the main reason I've been told that we don't hear much about it is people aren't willing to go on the record. Now, Reese, what did you make of the Tom Booth Amos video of him being attacked by his mechanic and just the whole kind of explosion over the last 3 or 4 days?
Well, to be honest, it's basically disgusting, isn't it? It's completely unacceptable behaviour. I mean, sure, have a bit of a shouted match, disagree with each other all you want, because fair enough, Tom does walk in shouting. Now, it is worth noting that it is a mechanic's fault that his bike's broken down, but riders always walk into the garage shouting. That's completely normal. They're full of adrenaline. They should just be sort of left to it, you know? Or if the mechanic wants to shout something back, you know, all power to him, because you can't exactly say you can dish words out and not take them back. But it's just pretty much unprovoked assault, because he just pushes him, just kicks him, pushes him a few times. They basically push him right to the back of the box, and then, like you say, you can't really see anymore. I don't think Tom fought back by the looks. It looks like he basically just took it. And again, I think this was just all down to the fact that, you know, he wanted to be in the Grand Prix paddock so much, it was his dream. So he just didn't say anything. He apparently didn't tell his manager, didn't tell Dorna, didn't tell anybody. So it's quite unacceptable. It looks quite bad on the CIP, to be completely honest, because they should have been public about this kind of thing. You can't sweep it under the rug, but that's what they did. They've kind of made some half-hearted apology towards him now, but that really means nothing, and it's only a PR thing. And to be fair, the people that put that out probably weren't even at the team at the time anyway, so I'm not slighting their PR team or anything like that, because it's the correct thing to do, but it just seems it's not a real apology, is it, at the end of the day? But apparently there are loads of problems with that team. Basically, it seems like, I mean, it's not been said or anything like that, but it's quite clear during that season anyway, they didn't give him the best equipment. Like, you could actually see that. He was clearly, like, his bike was clearly slower than Darren Binder's, and yeah, obviously this kind of stuff happening behind the scenes just puts it all together. I mean, you can try and go find the video if you want. If you kind of triggered by that kind of thing, I probably wouldn't, to be honest. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's not like, you know, you could go find it quite easy. It's all over Twitter. Very strange that it's just surfaced all of a sudden, because it's not like Tom has posted about it. It just got posted up randomly by somebody, didn't it? It was really bizarre. So I'm not sure where the clip came from. I don't know who got it either. I mean, whoever's got it, why have you held on to it for 3 years? It's a bit weird, but anyway, it's out, which is good. You know, apparently there's been like investigations done, I think, by Dorna and stuff into it. I think that this mechanic also now works at a different team, and the mechanic is known, but the people know, like, their names going around, but I believe it's just sort of not been revealed, so they don't receive loads of hate, which, you know, fair enough, I guess, to not get them absolutely bombarded. But yeah, it's just awful, and it's horrible to see. I mean, there was a sort of interview with, like, Alicia Swagro, like, got mentioned, and he was saying, you know, it's terrible. I mean, he's just a kid. Like, Tom Booth Amos was, maybe he was like 19 at the time. I'm not sure exactly how old he was, but he's not that old now. So, you know, it was horrible, really. You're trying to follow your Grand Prix dream. You're frustrated because your bike's been breaking down. They've basically been giving you a rubbish bike all year as well. You can see that, you know, compared to your teammate, because they get all the data. It must feel horrible as well, because obviously stuff has happened before that, so he feels not wanted in the team. It must be terrible for him. Now, I'll give him a shout out here. Not really anything to do with MotoGP, but he did compete in British Supersport as a sort of standing rider this weekend and did phenomenally. So, you know, he took it on the chin, because this must have been, like, he must be getting so much sort of attention this weekend for that. And then obviously he's also racing a category he doesn't normally race in, so fair play to him. And I'd say I hope he gets another Grand Prix shot, but I mean, well, I suppose he probably would still want to go back there if he's saying trying to keep his dream alive. And hopefully he does. Hopefully he does get some sort of opportunity. But it was absolutely terrible. And I believe that mechanic probably should be banned for life. I did see something as well that also said it was the same guy that did the stuff with the Adrian Fernandez, but I don't know if it is. But that's also rumored. So if it is, then yeah, that guy needs kicking out of all paddocks.
Yeah, just overall terrible. Really, the last couple of weeks, some very very bad like stuff coming out of the paddock, and apparently the guy in the video is John McPhee's crew chief, and apparently Max Racing have got rid of the two mechanics that caused the incident with Adrian Fernandez. So we are getting some sort of progress with it, but um, it was just very weird to see.
It's not great for Max Racing, then, is it?
It's not. It's not been It's been a bad few weeks for them. I believe it was Steve Brogan, who was a BSB team owner, who was the first one to put it up on Twitter. He's the one I saw first, and everyone that was reacting to it was reacting to his original tweet of the video. So, I don't know how he got his hands on it. I doubt he would have had it that long and not put it up, since it's just very random time to put it up. So I'd say he's just after being sent it now. But again, it's very strange that it's taken this long to come out, and just a whole horrible situation. But we're going to move on now to the Moto 3 qualifying session. Lots of dawdling again, going way off track. Some corners, almost in the gravel, everyone off the track. There's probably a couple of pictures on social media of bikes literally look like they've all run off the track. There's no one on the track, they're all off track. They have to do something about it. It's getting worse. Reece, what did you make of everyone going slow and just the whole shenanigans once again in qualifying?
Well, it was a bit of a farce, wasn't it, really? I mean, they've been a lot better lately, to be honest. I will give them credit for that. And you've probably noticed that by the fact that it's got to have been quite a few episodes since we've moaned about the stewards now, right? Because they've just not been making any decisions lately, so I think that's probably why. But I think the riders have cleaned up their act a little bit. You're always going to get a bit of dawdling in qualifying. You even get it in MotoGP, because it helps to have a toe. It also really helps to have a marker. Everybody that's ever raced a motorbike will tell you that, because it's true, right? And there's going to be it to some extent, and you're never going to get rid of it completely. But it was absolutely ridiculous once again. Typical Moto3 kind of stuff. Again, this is one of those circuits, long straight, hairpin, long straight, hairpin. It's one of those kind of tracks, so you're going to need it. That's why they're trying to get the toe so much, but it was ridiculous. And how nobody got a penalty, I'm not sure. Now, to be fair, obviously they did go off the track, which is ridiculous, but at least they're off the track and not on the racing line. Maybe that's why they didn't get a penalty, but I thought there was supposed to be some sort of rule where your sector time has to be within X% of your best sector time. So clearly that wasn't the case for most of those riders. So it's obviously not being actually enforced. So again, that's down to the stewards, but at least it wasn't quite as dangerous, I suppose, as when they're on the racing line. But then there was still some doing it on the racing line, and it just looks ridiculous as well. Above all else, it's supposed to be in a proper world championship. This is the highest level of Moto3 machinery in the world, right? This is the best riders on Moto3 bikes in the world. That's technically what the Moto3 World Championship is. So why are they doing this kind of stuff? It's just it just makes the championship look bad. Even on top of the safety stuff. Fair enough, it's probably not been as dangerous as it was in other situations, but even still, it shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, completely agree. It's getting stupid. It just looks bad for the sport, and it happens nearly every weekend at this point. And it's there has to be some sort of change, because it's just very stupid. It's annoying. It's not great to watch when they all coast around together and then they go and then you see people missing laps. It's terrible. But we are going to move on now to the race. Now, a lot of Moto3 practice was wet, meaning a lot of riders hadn't much dry running time. Of course, they had a warm-up and the race was dry also, but the lack of dry time had a bit of a different feel on the Moto3 race. Similar to the last few races, we ended up with much more spread out fields, bigger gaps, not really runaway winners as such, but kind of a breakaway again at the front. But someone who qualified really poorly was Sergio Garcia. He was way down in P8 P18, P16, somewhere like that. He was way back down the grid, and not surprisingly, got taken out by, I believe it was Adrian Fernandez, who made a mistake into the final corner, kind of high-sided himself and threw himself across the nose of his fellow Spaniard and took him out. Now, for me, that is terribly unfortunate, but what proceeded afterwards again is so annoying. Garcia remounts and goes back into it, comes back out, falls back into the racing paddock and just starts riding with the lead group. Well, not the lead group, but he starts riding with riders who are a lap ahead, and he just does it again. Now, eventually his team called him in, but if he got a black flag for that again, it could be a race ban if you get 2 black flags for the same incident. Now, I'm not too familiar of the rule book myself, but surely there has to be some sort of strict penalty. What did you make of, first of all, his weekend, his crash, and then the messing with other riders again?
Well, to be honest, yeah, his season's just dropped off a cliff, hasn't it? We were speaking about this in the last podcast. He's just not seemed confident since the second half of the season. I don't know what's happened to him, because at the start of the year, I think you said it last time, nothing could stop him. He always managed to find his way up into the lead group. He was always basically then the rider that played his cards best on the last lap. You know, he had some fantastic passes, like that clinical pass in Termas up the inside the penultimate turn was one of the best moves I've ever seen. You know, nothing could stop the guy. But then as soon as we got into the second half of the season, it's just not gone his way. And I really do think the fact that he got picked, Guevara got picked over him to go to Moto2, I think that has affected him a lot. I really do, because it seems to line up. I feel like Garcia is the kind of rider that would get affected by that a lot, like mentally. So his season just dropped off a cliff. Now, to be fair, both riders seem to struggle this weekend. So perhaps that's... I guess they both hadn't been... Well, Garcia's been to the track before. Guevara hasn't, I believe. But Garcia wouldn't have been, like, for a while, obviously 3 years. Maybe the team was struggling there a little bit as well. Not too sure. They both seem to struggle a bit. But Garcia the most, of course. He qualified, like, Pinot, like you said. And then, yeah, very unfortunate to get knocked off by Adrian Fernandez. To be fair to Adrian Fernandez, it wasn't really his fault. He just crashed, and his bike took out another rider. I always feel quite bad for the rider that's crashed in that instance, because if you've crashed on your own, not making some silly move, you've not really done a lot wrong. You've made a mistake, and unfortunately your bike has collected somebody else, I don't think. Really, even as the other rider, you can be annoyed, but you can't get too mad at that, because at least it's not, oh, wow, they didn't do something stupid, they just fell off, and unfortunately I couldn't avoid their bike. But that's what happens when you don't qualify at the order. You know, it's happened to him earlier on in the season as well, as he got took out in Silverstone. Don't know if he's... I think there's been another race he might have got took out as well. So, yeah, he's not... basically, his run of form continues. His championship's completely gone at this point. He's completely out of it now, really, I would say, with another DNF there. But the whole waiting up a lap thing, how could he do it again? Like, how could he do it again? Obviously, he just doesn't think in the race. Like, I don't know, because... At least last time you could say, alright, he wasn't even messing with Guevara or Foggia. Like, he was just battling random people. This time he actually chose Guevara's group. Now, it did seem like he boxed like almost as soon as he caught up to Guevara. So whether, like, his team were telling him... I think the team called him in by the looks of it. But whether he then maybe thought when he caught up to Guevara thinking, actually, hang on, maybe I shouldn't be battling him because that'll look quite bad. I don't know. It's so strange because it makes no sense why he's doing it, because... When Arenas did it a few years ago, it was quite clear that he was deliberately trying to mess Agora about. But when Garcia's been doing it, he's not really been putting hard moves on anybody. He's just been like acting like he's in the group. It's almost as if he drops behind the group, then catches them immediately and thinks, "Oh, I can unlap myself here." It's bizarre. Like, I don't know what he's doing. And to be honest, I'm not really sure why it was left up to the team to bring him in. Because really, especially when he's a repeat offender, like you were saying, he should be, you know, hit with the book a bit quicker. Because as soon as he's, like, tagged onto the back of a group, well, he's pretty clearly going to try and battle with them again. Like, that's what he's doing. So, he probably should have been sort of black flagged then. And, yeah, good job his team did bring him in. And good job he listened, to be fair. At least he could have ignored that call, because usually if you'd done something intentional like that, you probably would. So, good job he did heed that call, because if he had got black flagged again, yeah, he probably would have got a more harsh penalty, because, yeah, as not fantastic as the stewards are, I imagine if you do 2 things to get disqualified, you probably do get the book absolutely chucked at you, and there probably is some sort of rule as well. I mean, I'm not, 100% down with the FIM rule book, but I would have thought if you get disqualified for the same, basically if you get disqualified twice, to be honest, should be enough. But if you get disqualified twice for the same thing, I would have thought you must get some kind of ban or something. So yeah, good job he didn't get that. But I don't know what was going on in his head. Maybe it's just got to him that the championship's gone. But with that another crash, yeah, he's completely out of it now.
Yeah, completely finished. I think it's the only championship now that is done because Moto
Yeah.
2, we'll get to in a minute, is pretty tight. GP, of course, is
Even
as tight
us
as
just
ever.
saw it, yeah.
And Moto 3, we've had one guy all year, Gavier, who's managed to stay consistent when times have got tough with the flyways, with the later later European runs like the Mizanos and the Aragons, where his teammates Foggy and Fjords have just started to falter and misfire a bit. Now, Guevara did a very, very good damage limitation in today's race. Again, a rookie to this circuit. I already mentioned that the lack of dry time would have put him kind of on the back foot already. Coming on P5, that's as good as a race win or podium in my eyes. What did you make of his race today?
Yeah, it was phenomenal. It's a champion's ride. I've already described other rides he's done this season as that, but there's a reason why. You know, that's how you win a championship. You don't just do a champion's ride once. You do it throughout the season. So yeah, Guevara struggled a lot. Obviously, at a track he didn't know very well, Motegi, he did perfect there. You know, amazing weekend. He won the race, but this track comes here, struggles a lot more. It is a bit of a harder track to learn. There's a bit more to it. It's not so. Yeah, it is a bit more difficult. The first sector is probably not too bad, but then there's a quite flowing middle sector, a few little quirky little corners, but also more of where it is as well. So obviously Motegi's in Japan. It does get quite hot in Japan sometimes, to be fair, and there is that too. Especially I remember like when they do Suzuka 8 hour and stuff. Sometimes it's scorching temperatures there. But when you get to these countries like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, they get baking hot, and the tarmac gets greasy. It's really humid. So I think that's also worth considering because a lot of these lads, you know, they've only really ever raced in Europe. Again, to me, it'd be absolutely boiling in Europe, being from the UK, of course. But to them, they're used to these sort of Mediterranean temperatures. But when you get to, and like humidity, but when you get to some of these places where it's so hot and it's so humid, that's got to have a toll on the riders. You know, again, with a track that's a little bit weird. Also, when it's the grip level varies from session to session because of the greasiness of the track. He struggled obviously a lot this weekend. Managed to put a decent qualifying together. So with all that, he did a very good job there. But then in the race, you know, he didn't have the pace to go with the front group. And you know what? He didn't go with them. He didn't crash trying to go with them. He just accepted. Well, he probably didn't accept. He kind of just lost touch. But he didn't overstep the mark to try and do it. He wasn't then running off the track to try and find the lap time, picking up along that penalty or something like that, or you know, getting entangled in some battle with like Dennis on Chu or Munoz, somebody like that. You know, just trying to like desperately hang on to the front group. He just sat there. He did his lap times on his own, and he slowly sort of built his way through the pack, started passing people. And to be honest, he looked like he was going to be on for fourth at one point. He did then get a bit beaten up, but it's Moto3. It happens to everybody. You can be the guy that stays at the front of the pack all the time, but you do have some races where you get beaten up. So I'm not going to hold that against the lad. Ended up fifth place, I do believe, in the end. So again, not even a terrible result. And that's 11 points to your championship there. Garcia getting 0. All right, Fogger did well. We'll talk about Fogger in a minute. But Fogger's Fogger's miles out anyway. Like, he's even further off than Garcia, who's pretty far off now. So, yeah, that's exactly what he needed to do. He needed to bring the bike home this weekend at a track he's struggling at. And to be fair, he actually got a decent result on top of that. So, faultless again, Guevara. And this is why he's going to win the championship, hands down.
Yeah, nail on the head there. Now, Foggia, you mentioned back to winning ways. That Honda looked very, very quick and slippery down the main straight and that massive straight down to turn 3 and then down into 4 and 5. Again, we always can ask the question, where has this come from? Why now? What will happen next weekend? We won't know. He's just such a massive question mark, Foggia. And like, it was a great result from today. He looked very, very good. It's just, if he was consistent, he could have this title wrapped up so many times in so many different years. But here we are now, we're another year where we're saying, well, he's hitting form at this time of year, mate, but there's really no chance unless we get sort of a massive bit of bad luck for Guevara over the next couple of rounds, I don't see Foggia really doing it on actual beating him on pace and stuff. But what did you think about Foggia's race today, and what do you think he has any chance in the championship at all?
Well, it was a great race for Foggia, but we've seen this kind of thing so many times. This race kind of reminds me more of Mandalika to some extent, which, now that I think about it, I hadn't made the connection till now, was similar conditions, I guess, because Moto3, the race was dry for both of them, hot, greasy track. Maybe that actually works pretty well for Foggia, so perhaps I'll have to watch out for him in Malaysia, because you do get those kind of conditions there too. So that probably actually is something that he excels at, it seems. I actually hadn't really had him down as that, because he struggles a lot in the rain. So usually if you're good in the greasy conditions, you're good in the rain and vice versa, but it seems to suit him pretty well, these conditions. It was, just another good race result from him. But weirdly, the Honda looked a lot better. It looked like it used to again. It was so bizarre. That Leopard was blasting past the KTMs again. And you know what? There was more than one Honda in the front group, and there was a Honda that wasn't a Leopard Honda. Ricardo Rossi was in the front group. So I don't know. It's so weird because the KTM's looked hands down the better package this season. There's been some races where the Leopard guys have looked good, but pretty much every race, aside from Qatar where Mino won, the Hondas looked pretty bad. But this round, it just almost seemed fixed. Now, I don't know whether that's because of the flowing middle sector. It could be, because the middle sector's flowing, but also a lot of the long straights do have a bit of a flowing corner. Like turn 1 is a high corner speed corner, so it's not all about acceleration. So I don't know whether that was helping the Honda. Definitely helped Foggia out anyway, because really he made a mistake at the last corner on one lap, ran really wide, like absolutely to the car park wide, lost the position, retook the lead, but no one looked like they could lay a finger on him. Just won those races for him, a bit like Massano. Like, he just really was so good. But it boggles your mind, because he had races like this last year, like quite a lot of them to be fair, at the end of the year, was when he was gaining in on Acosta, and everyone was like, oh, he's going to easily win this championship. Had a rough first round at Qatar, alright, fair enough, that sort of came down to penalties, but again, he still didn't have a great comeback ride. Mandalika dominates, does pretty well at Termas. He's got this championship wrapped up, he's going to have loads of races like this, but he's just been up and down and up and down. Now, to be fair, he's actually not too far out the championship anymore in terms of points, but no, I don't think he's going to win it, because he's already thrown too many away. He will throw more away as well, but just because of the way his season's been going. There's 3 races left. Chances are at least one of them is going to be like 15th, just because of how his season's been. Now, watch out for him at Phillip Island. He might be pretty good there. Corner speed seems to suit him pretty well. So, again, the Honda might work pretty well there. I think that is kind of part of the problem, but Foggia himself has just been so inconsistent. So, no, to answer your question, I don't think he's in the championship, but he did do a good ride today.
Yeah, he did a fabulous ride. When he does show up, he is probably the quickest man in the category. It's just once in every 6 rounds. But we are going to move on now swiftly to Moto2. Now, no such issues in qualifying for the Moto2 boys. Home rider Somkat Chantra put it on pole for his home race. There was so much excitement coming into it. It was rained off on the grid. They declared a dry race, and it just started spitting, and then they declared it a full wet race. There was a small delay. There was confusion. There was so much going on, so much pressure. It got red flagged eventually, but we'll cover that in a minute. But the conditions were so inconsistent. Some parts of the track was a river. Some parts of the track were barely wet. And then we had this issue where there was so much aquaplaning, so much spray, so much going on around the track that it was, I think, race direction, it was kind of split down the middle. Like, do we red flag this now, even though sectors 1 and 3 are bone dry almost, and sector 2 is a swimming pool? Or do we hopefully it kind of levels out and they ride through it? Unfortunately, Chantra crashes out on one of the first 6 or 7 laps. Terrible for the home fans, for the home rider. Pretty fast crash as well. He was absolutely motoring away with it. It really was his conditions. If we think back to Mandalika, not as wet, but it was quite similar result from there where he absolutely was ridiculously quick out of the block. Fortunately, that day he won it. Today slightly wetter, and he's unfortunately bit the dust, and he had a big crash. Really, in fairness to him, kind of got hit with the bike as well, which wasn't nice to see. Did you think it was red flagged too early, too soon, or just right? What do you make of the whole red flag situation with the weather?
Shouldn't have started at all. They should have waited till later, because the problem was, yeah, like you say, to be honest, end of Sector 3, start of Sector 4 was almost bone dry. Like, it was almost dry tyres through there. But then Sector 1, so the sort of run from Turn 1 down towards Turn 2, and then the run up from Turn 3 to 4, those were the worst parts. And then also part of the, at one point it got pretty bad down towards the last corner. But those first two runs, so the first two long straights, they were waterlogged. They were like swimming pools. Now, when the race started, it was pretty bad. As soon as the race started, I was like, they're gonna have to stop this. That's what, like I said, I was watching it with my parents. I was like, they're gonna have to stop this race, because there was so much standing water, but then more the spray. You couldn't see, and with standing water, you can high side on a straight. If you high side on a straight in a pack and you can't see, chances are that rider's gonna get really badly injured and potentially die, because if the rest of the pack cannot see somebody on the floor, then it's too unsafe to ride. If you can't see the rider in front, what if let's say no one's crashed, let's say the rider in front of you has a mechanical failure and you don't see him and you just ram them at the back. Again, we've seen fatalities from that kind of thing before. This is what you have to think. You don't think, oh, it's just a bit wet, they might fall off on the rain. It's more like they can't see. So yes, the aquaplaning was bad enough on its own, but then they also couldn't see because of the spray. Now, it was bad enough sort of on the formation lap and on the first lap of the race, right? It was pretty bad. We saw Cameron Bobier, he must have come from about 20th or something. I don't know where he came from, but it's from miles behind. So, Bobier's up to second, into turn 4, runs a bit wide, doesn't actually get to the curb. There's a lake, basically, at that point in the track. He hits it, just immediately crashes, because it's literally so deep. You could see like how deep that water was. It was unreal. So I do feel a bit sorry for Bobier there. Same corner that Chantra later went down on. However, Chantra hits him on the inside. So it seemed like it was puddling on the inside and outside of that corner. But anyway, back to lap 1. It was bad enough then. The aquaplaning looked pretty bad, and the spray was pretty bad. When they come round to turn 1 on the next lap, it is hammering it down, and this time it really is a swimming pool. Like, the tyres are like completely, like, the bottom half of the tyres are completely submerged in water. It's ridiculous. Like, well, not bottom half, but bottom half of sort of the sort of contact patch area. So not like the bottom half of the whole wheel, but like the bottom part of the tyre was basically, it was too bad. Basically, they should have stopped it then. Fair enough if they started it and then it did immediately get worse, like on the second lap. So they could have stopped it then. I'd have said, all right, fair enough. They gave it a go, and then it absolutely downpoured. But they just kept going. And to the credit of the riders, not a lot of them went down. There was a few that went down, of course, like we said. But a lot of them were keeping up right. So, I mean, I suppose that means they could argue that it was obviously good enough to ride, but it was so dangerous. I mean, there were so many gears higher. Like, I remember on board with Canet, they're going like 4th gear through a section, which, yeah, to be fair, probably is normally in 4th gear, but they weren't near that speed. They were just in there so they didn't spin up. It was absolutely crazy. I don't think it should have started at all. It got red flagged, of course, then sitting around the pits for a long time. They then went out to restart. It was slightly better, but pretty much just as bad. So then it got stopped again. Then, obviously, MotoGP had to start at some point, so they obviously ended up just calling it a race result, which gave Tony Arbolino the victory. So, once again, in tricky conditions, he manages to come out on top. You got to feel for Salac. Came one corner away from winning that race. Bless him, just ran a bit wide and got overtook. But, I don't think it should have started in the first. It probably should have started around when MotoGP did, but they have to get MotoGP in, but again, at the same time, that doesn't mean they should risk the safety of the Moto2 riders. So, yeah, just not ideal.
Yeah, and I remember towards the end of the first red flag, we had the two, just after Salash got past, they came out, final corner, they're going down the pit straight, and you could hear them spinning and having moments in the straight line. And that's when the two front boys threw their hands up, and within 15 seconds, the red flag was out. So I think race direction were kind of hoping that the riders were going to act kind of responsibly and throw a hand up if they thought it was too bad. But we easily could have seen Arbolino crash because if you watched it live, you'd see him have a big moment. You hear the revs hit the roof, and he was just literally, that would have been fourth or fifth gear. Like, so the fact they were spinning in that much water, incredibly dangerous. And we go back to Cambobia's crash. When he crashed, he just crashed as he was going towards the curb, so he just naturally slid away from the race line. But a lot of people ran wide through the corner because of the puddling on the inside and the outside. He was very lucky that he was really far up the grid, that by the time he crashed, everyone was already kind of passing him instead of being around him, and just there could have been a lot worse with that one as well. So we got very lucky today with a lot of incidents, but very questionable decisions to leave them race in that condition. But in terms of the championship, there was very little change due to they both finished mid-points. I think it's 1 point now, or what, point and a half is the difference, because we got half points, say, for the Moto2 race being cancelled, shortened distance, cancelled only half points. So it is no longer possible for them to finish on equal points. They were on equal points for some parts of today's race. What did you make of the two performances from Oyagora and Fernandez in today's very tricky conditions?
Well, to be completely honest, there's not a lot to say because the race wasn't very long. Like, we hadn't got that far into the race. Agora was kind of making his way through a little bit, but both of them, to be fair, just kept their heads. They were just going round. I mean, it was absolutely awful conditions, so fair play to the pair of them for not dropping out of the top 10 or whatever. They managed to stick there. I think, was there like one rider between them? I think there was. I don't know if Augusto actually ended up getting in front of that guy. It might have been Roberts. I don't remember exactly, but I think at one point there was actually one rider between them, and I don't know whether that ended that way or not. But there was only going to be a sort of a 1 or 2 point change anyway, and then with the half points, it's even less. So in terms of the championship, this race almost didn't happen, because any position where they're actually going to finish for the rest of the season will probably be a bigger points deficit than at this track. So this track basically doesn't affect it a lot. I should actually have got the actual standings up to see how many points it is between them now, but it's going to be
1.5.
It's literally just 1.5 between the two. Wow, okay. So yeah, it is ridiculously close. Yeah, so they both did pretty well in what there was of the race, but I can't really comment on the rides as a whole because I think, what did we get, about 7 laps in? It wasn't many, was it?
Yeah.
It was very, very brief into the race, but fair play. They both stayed upright, didn't drop out the points, and they both got away without an injury. And to be honest, that's probably the most important thing, because you could easily crash in a race like this and get injured. So fair play to the pair of them there.
Yeah, and you made the point that they both kept it rubber side down, and in a race like today, that could easily have been 10, 15 points thrown away there now for Oyagor or Fernandez if they both crashed or one of them crashed. So they did a very good solid ride. None of them were, I don't think either of them wanted really to go racing in that sort of condition, because it was the old saying, the penalty wouldn't fit the crime to crash in that conditions. It would have been so wet. It would even be your fault for someone who crashes. You could easily crash aquaplaning when you're doing absolutely nothing wrong. So I'm quite glad that they finished close together. Nobody gained or lost anything from it. So we would move on to Australia for the two of them. But now we're on to MotoGP. Now the race started again after a lovely delay of about an hour. Once again, we had more weather conditions. We didn't know how wet it would be. We didn't know what the track was like. Finally, after the long delay, we got going. The opening few laps, they were taking pretty gingerly. Of course, Miller made a very good start. And then we had the likes of Oliveira and Pecco coming through as well. What did you make of the start of the race? And who did you kind of pinpoint at the start for someone to be a wet rider?
Well, actually, at the start, I mean, I kind of thought Oliveira as soon as I saw him right up there. Just remember back to Mandalika. So that's who I thought, like, after the start, pretty briefly. Also Miller, because Miller could get 2 in a row because he was winning the race. But beforehand, I actually thought Fabio was going to do pretty well. He didn't, obviously, but it's I thought he was going to do quite well. I also thought Marquez, he did pretty well. Although Alex again is not too bad in the rain. But yeah, off that start, it was a bit of a tentative start for some of the riders. Fabio Quartararo mainly. He got pushed wide at the first corner a little bit, lost a lot of places there, just hemorrhaged places throughout the whole lap. I think Viñales ran completely off the track at turn 2, I believe. Or is it turn 3? I don't know whether the kink on the straight counts as a corner.
Turn 3, yeah.
Why do those corners? That's not a corner. Whatever. I think I went on about this on one of the other podcasts as well, but either way, it doesn't matter. At that corner, that hairpin at the end of that long straight, that's like right near the beginning of the lap, just so that we all know where it is. He ran completely off the track there, so he dropped down to the back. So it was one of those things where people just didn't want to take the risk. You got the guys, you got the likes of Oliveira and Miller where they haven't got anything to lose. I mean, if they fell off, they fell off. They might. Like, I guess in a race, you don't think, I might hurt myself, unless you're in a championship, situation. They're just thinking, I could win today if I push hard enough. So yeah, it was always going to be that kind of race for those kind of riders because they've not really got a lot to lose, nothing to play for. Well, we might come on to Miller in a little bit, but he may now have something to play for in the championship because after another pretty good result from him, he's ahead of Bastianini now, I believe. I think he's within like 40 points, so 3 rounds to go. Technically, it's possible, so I guess Miller does have something to play for now, but Oliveira definitely didn't. So obviously he got off to a good start, but we'll probably talk more about his actual race in a minute. But the first lap, pretty tentative for some of the top guys. Some people took advantage. Marini had a pretty good start and then obviously fell off after a couple of laps. Bezzecchi probably being the main guy that took a good start. Into turn 1, obviously he went into there. He was on pole position. Probably worth noting that to be fair, he got a legitimate pole position in the dry. Went into turn 1 and just decided, you know what, just gas it on the runoff on the outside. And then of course he had to drop back 1 position because of it. But it was pretty controlled before that, but after that he really dropped back. So yeah, I think Bezzecchi had a good start, but there was obviously a lot of riders taking it tentatively. Allega Leish was pretty tentative. Well, I say Leish was pretty tentative at the start. He sent Binder to China at the hairpin, same hairpin where Viñales went off. So yeah, it was a bit of a ginger start for some, but some others definitely relished that.
Yeah, and you did say that Bezzecchi had to give the position back. After he gave the position back, he just went backwards. It was quite strange. Of course, Aleix got a long lap penalty for his incident with Binder, so that put him back. And then Fabio, he did get beaten up early in the race, but he went back to P17. And as did I think he'd do well as well, same as you. I thought he would come back through, but he just went backwards and backwards and backwards and finished the 3rd Yamaha.
He did beat Cal. He did beat Cal in the end. He was 2nd.
Oh, did he?
He overtook him on like the penultimate lap, I think. But either way, he was behind Cal Crutchlow, who's been retired for 2 years for most of the race.
Yeah, very good point. So, a nightmare race for Fabio. I haven't heard anything from him. He came straight back into pits and literally went out the back and probably straight into the motorhome. He's not known as a wet weather rider, but at the start of the season we had Mandalika where he did very well. He did well previously in Le Mans last year in the wet. So it's not that he's a bad wet weather rider, but very interesting. What do you think went wrong for him today? And who's your money on now going forward?
I don't know what was up with him today, because it's not like, I mean, the Yamaha doesn't work well in the drying conditions, which most of this race was, because it wasn't actually raining. So, fair enough, there's that. But Morbidelli had like his best result since Mandalika. So, I mean, which again, I guess was like the rain. So Morbidelli was up there. Cal was in front of him for most of the race. So, it was a Fabio issue. Now, whether it's a Fabio-specific technical issue, I don't know. He could well have had a problem, because it did seem strange. Because obviously you could go back to 2020 and say, he gets races where he starts losing positions and he loses his head and he can't get through. But he's not like that anymore, and he's had races where he's had bad starts and fought back through, or at least managed to salvage something. Like, he's finished in the top 10 like every race he's finished. So it's weird. There's something more to this. I don't know what the problem could have been. Maybe he just didn't get the best feeling from the tyre. Obviously, that's quite crucial. But at no point during the race did he have the leader's pace. He was slower than Morbidelli like the entire race. It wasn't like Morbidelli got in front of him at the start and then gained a gap because of that, because obviously you do gain a lot of time on the first lap, and then Quartararo never caught him. Like Morbidelli was quicker than Quartararo the whole race, which, all right, I'm not trying to say Morbidelli's not great or anything like that. I'm not trying to diss Morbidelli, but this whole season Fabio's wiped the floor with Morbidelli, and Morbidelli's all of a sudden quicker than him, and Morbidelli wasn't quicker than him last time it was raining. So it's not just Fabio in the rain. So I think there must have been some sort of problem with him, whether his setting didn't feel right. I know he struggled a lot with the setting at the start of the weekend. I think he went back to like his 2019 setup, which is quite funny. Shows you how little the Yamaha's changed. Although you could look at the Yamaha and see that yourself. So I don't know, it's just so strange. But in terms of who's my money's on, like for the championship, that's tough. But I don't know, Bagnaia is 2 points behind him now, and I don't know. Aleix doesn't seem to have it. He's not had a great run of form as of late. Miller, obviously, I mentioned him before. He's 40 points back, so I can't.
Yeah, he's actually 35 points back.
That's basically 40, isn't it? But yes, on a technical, 5 points makes a big difference, especially at this point of the season. So thank you for correcting me. Yeah, it's 35 points back.
Have been lost by less.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if Bagnaia loses the championship by 5 points, people will be blaming Bastianini. So you can see where 5 points does matter quite a lot. But yeah, so I don't see Miller really having a chance, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's Bagnaia almost now. But next race is Phillip Island. It could be good for. It could be really bad for Ducati, really good for Yamaha. Then you've got Malaysia, which has always been good for Yamaha as well. I don't know, it's hard to say, but I think they've both had really bad weekends now. So, like, before you could say, the ball was back in Fabio's court, but now he's had a bad weekend. Bagnaia had a good one. Bagnaia will have a lot of confidence from that. So I think Bagnaia's got the upper hand now, but in terms of rider ability, Fabio's got the upper hand. So I don't know, it's tough, but I'm going to say probably Bagnaia now, because 2 points from like 90 something. I think he can probably make the difference now with 3 races to go.
I'm going to still stick with Fabio. I think Phillip Island, high corner speed, I reckon he'll be able to qualify well, because there's the start finish straight, you come out at such speed that he'll probably carry more speed out of the corner and negate a bit of the deficit he'd be losing out. He'll carry more speed through Dunes, through Siberia, through the Woolshed, all them corners. Yeah. He'll have so much more corner speed, you'd imagine. So if he can qualify well, get the start, I could see him in there.
Yeah,
Sepang, the 2 straights will kill him, but the rest of the track is very, very Yamaha track. We had Rossi almost winning a 2018 Maverick. In 2019, I want to say, winning.
Yeah, he won that, because Fabio and Morbidelli were 1-2, but then the race they just dropped back, and Vinales won. So Rossi was almost on the podium, so they went pretty well that weekend. Rossi just lost out to Dovi, so
just Yamaha seems to be able to go well there, even without that straight, without the 2 straights even. Valencia is a cold track, cold go-karting track. Nobody wants to go there in November for a championship settler, so I'm going to still edge my bets on Fabio, but I could be easily wrong. I'm going to rule Aleix out and Jack too. I don't think without more races like today for Fabio that Pecco would need to crash, Fabio would need to score 0 for them to gain that back quickly enough. 3 races isn't a lot really. You need some serious intervention for that really to happen. But going back to today's race, Oliveira masters of rain again. At what point did you reckon he had this in the bag?
Having it in the bag, basically, as soon as I saw he started to catch up to Miller, I knew he was going to win. But to be honest, from when he was about 4th place, I felt like I just had the feeling. Oliveira, I mean, he doesn't get enough credit. People say that Binder doesn't get enough credit, right? But Oliveira really doesn't get enough credit, because people act like Binder is about 1 million times better than Oliveira. But today, for example, Oliveira showed that's not the case. I know Binder got punted off, but 1 to 2 seconds loss. It's not like he lost a couple of places too, but it is a wet race, so it's easy to gain huge chunks back, because the pace is usually quite drastic. It's more spread out compared to a regular race. I mean, really, the guy just rode phenomenally. Back, just like Mandalika again, awesome ride. he just has a knack for controlling races. He just carves his way through every single race he's won, aside from the Austria race, where obviously Miller and Espargaro went to the car park and he went through. Have just been controlled from the front. Portimao 2020, they probably didn't even know he was there because they didn't see which way he went because he was that far in front. Catalunya 21, who had him down for the win there? Dominant, controlled victory. That's 2 in the dry there. Then you got 2 in the wet, so you got Mandalika here and here. So that's these 2 this year. So he's just such a smooth, such a good rider. Basically, as long as he gets away with the front guys. I mean, he had a great race in Motegi, just like Brad Binder did. So the KTM, it does seem like it's always been a good race bike. That's been clear because they've always come through, both riders in the race. I mean, sure, there's Tech 3, but they may as well be on push bikes, to be fair. Half this season, they've not had a great year, poor Tech 3. But if you talk about the 2 factory guys, it seems to work when they start up there. So as soon as Oliveira sort of got up into that top group, I knew he was probably going to win the race because the KTM is so good in race pace. Oliveira's pretty good in the rain. He's just a fantastic rider. Great. He always pulls good passes on people as well. So yeah, just from that point, I knew he was going to do it. And once he got in the lead, I thought he'd clear off more than he did, to be honest. But I think he just always controlled the gap. He didn't push more than necessary. He knew where the limit was. So you can't fault the guy. Perfect race once again.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see him next year on a satellite Aprilia. Obviously,
it'll be tasty.
It'd be. You'd imagine he'll be pretty tidy on that bike. A very smooth rider on a bike that you would imagine to be quite smooth. So maybe a proper good year next year, maybe, because of course the KTM has kind of let him down in his couple of years in the GP class. He's never had a bike consistent enough to go after a full season. When he's shown he definitely has the talent. But moving on to someone else who has the talent and doesn't always show it, Pecco Bagnaia. What did you make of his race today? You're tipping him for the championship now. What does he have to do for you to win the championship for the remainder of these races?
He has to do this again. That's what he has to do. It was a great race for him, to be fair. I mean, we saw what happened to him about a week ago in the rain in Motegi. He qualified 12th. And the only reason he qualified 12th was because he got through to Q2 in the dry. That's the only reason why. He'd already got through in free practice. He could very well have started at the back of the grid in Motegi. He was miles off in the rain. But I mean, he was also miles off in Mandalika. I think he finished outside the points in Mandalika, didn't he? Or did he finish 15th? It was something ridiculous. I remember we were saying that he picked up like 1 point over the first 3 races or something like that. It was something ridiculous. So he's not a rain guy. Let's put it that way. He's not the and a lot of the Italian riders tend to struggle in the rain. There is some that obviously are quite good, but it does seem to be a bit of a trope. We've seen it with Foggia and stuff. For example, I guess it's because it doesn't rain a lot in Italy, so that must be quite nice. But obviously, for riding in the rain, it's not ideal. But he did a fantastic race. Really, he didn't look like he was going to crash at any point. We've seen that, and to be honest, he's on the back foot. He had the pressure on him after making a big mistake. So fair play. He brought the bike home, which is something he has not done on a few occasions this year. So he kind of did exactly what he needed to do. And yeah, in terms of what he needs to do, just these kind of races again, because the Ducati's better than the Yamaha, so basically just needs to stay on the bike. Alright, Fabio could beat him at somewhere like Phillip Island, but now he's only 2 points behind. If he's a few places in front of, if Fabio has one bad race, or it doesn't even have to have a bad race, as long as he can sort of finish on the podium every race from now, there's going to be some races where Fabio either can't or is in 3rd place and he is in the lead. And that should be enough for him to overtake him. So that's the reason why I'm tipping him. I think, obviously, if it was a straight head-to-head fight, if they're on the same equipment or whatever, I would say, Quartararo easily. But just because there's going to be more races where the Ducati is better, there's more races where Bagnaia has a free victory over Quartararo than there is Quartararo being able to pull something out and beating him. So that's why I think he's going to win. Basically, just keep it clean, don't fall off, which is a lot easier said than done for Bagnaia.
Very, very easily said. In our warm little seats here while we sit there Sunday night.
Yeah, it's like, this guy's terrible.
Yeah, I think a lesson is learned for everyone there that these guys are on the limit most weeks, it's very easy just to just for us to blur the lines between Oh, he's terrible, and he made a minor mistake, but it was a big day for today's championship. Going forward, we look 2 weeks into the future. Phillip Island, give me a name out of the hat. Who do you think is going to have a good race there?
Well, I'll actually stick by what I said to my friend earlier, actually. I think Vinales. Vinales is going to win the race.
Absolute wild card.
It's not, I have a reason. I have a reason. I can back it up. The man, he won in 2017 at Phillip Island, I believe. Or was it 2018 that he won?
18, he high-sided himself over the bars. Marquez won.
That was 19.
Okay, he might have won in 18.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he must have...
Wasn't 18 Cal? Was that 16?
That was 16, Cal. We're trying to work this out now. 70... I think 18 was the year that Marquez went at the back of Zarco, weren't it?
Zarco,
so, yeah.
yeah.
That would be the race that he won, I would imagine. But he goes well there, anyway, either way. I reckon the Aprilia will suit it well there. And to be fair to Vinales, out of the two Aprilia riders, second half of the season, he's been better. I'll just say he's been better than Aleix, because even today, all right, Aleix got a long lap penalty, but he got a long lap penalty himself for hitting off Brad Binder. And Vinales, yeah, right, during practice and stuff, he probably struggled more and he was shaking his head. It looked like he was struggling a bit, but he made that mistake on the first lap or got pushed off. I don't know exactly what happened, but he ended up going off the track and dropping down to last, but he got back up into the top 10. So he didn't let it get to him. He actually had a pretty good race, to be fair, in terms of pace. Just unfortunately, he lost so much time at the beginning. He obviously beat Aleix in Mateki, but that wasn't Aleix's fault. That was a mechanical problem. He fought in the lead group right till the end at Misano. At Silverstone, he almost won the race, which is a track that's obviously very similar to Phillip Island in terms of the fact there's loads of high-speed corners. So that's my reason. I think Vinales will win. I can give you my podium. I think Vinales, Quartararo, and Miller. This could be my podium.
Miller is my man. I think Quartararo will have a good weekend now. How good, I don't know, because I still could see him getting jumped by turn 1, even if he's on pole.
Yeah, I mean, he only made it around like a quarter and a half in 2019. So
It's true too.
Which is the last time, obviously, he went there. He was on the Yamaha. I think he qualified okay there. All I remember about that start was, Rossi's winning.
400 start for Valentino, and he absolutely made it. He made everyone.
He went around the outside to the first corner. It's like, right. 2002,
yeah.
Rossi turned up for the first corner.
Yeah. So Miller is my man. Podium, I go Miller, Aleix, Fabio.
Ah, very nice. So neither of us saying Bagnaia. Even though I said Bagnaia going to win the championship, I've not put him on the podium.
I was thinking that Phillip Island is a very smooth rider track. You'd imagine a Lorenzo.
That's why I think Jack Miller, smooth rider. But I know why we've said him, because he goes really well there. But that's quite funny.
To kind of just stoke the Casey Stone on him, getting it sideways and drifting it.
Yeah.
Back
It does work. You can make that work at Phillip Island.
Yeah, it's true. But it'll be 2 weeks' time until we can look back at our terrible predictions of Maverick Vinales.
No, I'm going to be 100% right. I'm going to be 100% right. When Vinales wins this race, right, we have to play this clip of you making fun of me for picking Vinales.
I cannot wait for this to come back. We are going to leave it there for episode 17. We're getting into the final few races. I hope you have enjoyed today's podcast. Thanks for listening in. If you are watching on YouTube, drop a like, subscribe to see more. And if you are listening in on Spotify, drop us a 5-star rating. It really helps get the podcast out there. Now, 2 weeks' time, we'll be back for the Australian GP. Catch you then. Thanks for listening.